Some people will not understand how far you've come. Your job isn't to over-explain. Keep leading by example. They'll either get it or they won't. As reposted on Instagram by Alex L, reposted by Megan Good. Hello everybody, welcome to Tuesday's edition of the Toy Talks podcast. I'm feeling really mellow today. It's Toy Washington here. Listen, do you know how I always prepare for a podcast episode? I usually start preparing mentally midweek. So I post on a Tuesday and then I mentally prepare for the next episode on a Wednesday. That's when I start putting together in my mind what I want to talk about. And usually I have an idea of what I want to talk about. And then I have to be in the space to be able to. And then pretty much when I know I'm going to record like the day of, I make sure like I have a nap if I'm tired, which I am today, but I'm always tired. And then I'll have like a hot shower. I might do a facial depending on how I feel, and then like a hot cup of coffee, and I sit and I might have some post-it notes. Maybe something's popped into my head. I'll write it down on a post-it note and put it on the desk. And this is the way I have started this episode. So this episode is called Mummy Issues, and you guys know that I don't typically give you the titles a week in advance, but I think the reason I did for this particular episode is because I knew that I had to mentally prepare for this episode. I've spoken to my therapist because it's a topic that's very dear to my heart. I have been very frank and very honest about my problematic toxic relationship with my own mother, and those of you who have followed me on Snapchat, you guys know that I've been very honest and open about it, where I believe it's rooted, and some of my battles as well in the moment of things happening. And a lot of things have happened over the course of the last few years. Obviously, those of you who do not know, I have the mother and daughter masterclass where I'll go into a bit of detail about decisions that I have made and why I've made those particular decisions, but also to give people a bit more understanding about some of the things that have happened that have given rise to decisions that I've had to make. And in this episode, I want to touch on a couple of mummy issues, few. I think a lot of people polarize daddy issues, especially when it comes to females, a bit more about the male relationship over the last few years, but typically it's the female relationship with the father. So in this episode, it is going to be centered on the daughter relationship with one's mother. We do have a dilemma that I want to talk through on this episode, and the dilemma is really, really important because I think a lot of people have gotten quite relaxed because we're remote working, and it's very important that this dilemma, number one, was sent to me. So I'm grateful that this person trusted me with this dilemma, but also that we need to talk about it here on the podcast because we learn from each other. That's how we learn, and that's how we grow, and that's how we learn to grow and navigate in the world of work, is by sharing and understanding sometimes where we have gone wrong, taking the positives, and also learning to deal with the learning lessons. So sometimes we have to carry L's, but the hope is that we don't repeat the same L's and we don't continue carrying L's as part of our learning process. That being said, before we get into the main crust, is that it? The main crust, the main middle? Listen, just the main bit of this episode. I do want to talk about a couple of things. So I don't even know where to start really. I'm very much I consider myself a black activist, and I've told you guys this before, and I definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, as a black woman myself, I centre black women in all that I do, especially with this platform. And it's also important to me to understand how, as we navigate the world of work, it is life that we're navigating too. And being a black woman in today's society is not only difficult, but it's also laced with so many macroaggressions that are focused on black women. And I've often sat there thinking about why. What is it about us as black women that continuously be centered in a lot of issues and a lot of negative issues, whereby I feel like non-black people continue to overstep in a way that can only be rooted in racism. So I shared this on my Instagram stories, and obviously with Instagram stories it lasts 24 hours, and those of you who know me, you know that I'm very, very, very active on my personal Instagram page, which is Toya_Washington. If you want to know what I'm up to, what I'm doing, Instagram stories, I'm usually doing something, and I'm on there talking and speaking my truth. On Sunday, as you guys know, and if you don't then you now know, I am very committed to my weight loss journey, fully understanding that being a 5'4" overweight woman is not healthy. Body confidence and all of that, the reality is that when you strip back all that body confidence, you have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, issues with my skin because of my weight and the junk that I was eating. So I committed myself to doing exercise. So every Sunday I do a spin class, and in the week I try as much as possible to do Zumba. And I had to kind of drop off a little bit, especially when I'm on my period, because my periods are very, very difficult and very, very painful. Then I have to miss a class for that week. Got back on it anyway, and I had spin class on Sunday. So as I went to spin class, I was running late. I was like 2 minutes late. I think partly because it's not too far from my house, so you tend to think you have more time than you actually do. I get to the spin class, and I've been there a few times now, and I usually sit at the back. Because I was running late, I forgot my chair, because you know those spin bikes are not good for vaginas. I'm telling you now, my vagina has not been the same since the spin class, because my vagina doesn't know what's happening. I don't understand how you can have a spin class with the seat so hard. It's like, do you know what it is? It's like sitting on a brick wall, like saddling a brick wall for long periods of time. It's awful. I digress. So as I sat on the chair, the instructor came over and he adjusted my chair for me, and he adjusted things because I think he's picked up that I have to spend at least 5 minutes adjusting it. And he was so gracious and so kind. And as I sat on the bike, I was doing the exercises, he was instructing, and the class was full. I was sitting, to my left was a black woman, to my right was a white woman. I'm sitting in the middle, and it was a row of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a row of 5, I believe, 4 or 5. So as I'm getting into this now, I'm really like stretching my body, bending forward, bending to the left, bending to the right. The white lady to my right turns round to me. Remember, this is a spin class. She is dripping with sweat. And as she's talking, spit's coming out of her mouth because she's trying to break through all the sweat. But she couldn't give up the opportunity to turn to me. Excuse me. And she's shouting over this music. You need to lift up the front because you're bending too far, and you're going to end up hurting yourself because it's going to force you to stretch. And I'm just looking at her, and I couldn't believe it. I paused, I turned to her. I said, excuse me, can you mind your own business, please? And she goes, oh, I'm just trying to help. I said, but I didn't ask you. Concentrate on what you're doing and face forward. That's what I said to her. And I just thought to myself, ordinarily, right? One would listen to this and say, well, Toya, she was just being helpful. No, she wasn't, because no one asked her for help. No one asked her to get herself involved. And masquerading control with trying to help is a very, very big problem. It's a big problem because it denotes control. The idea that a black woman who is coming to a spin class, who has had the instructor adjust her chair, adjust everything else, and not only am I doing the exercises, I am willingly bending forward, and I deliberately had the front of the spin low so that I can stretch myself and bend forward, because I missed the stretching at the beginning of the class. See, there's a rationale. But I no longer explain myself to white women or non-black people. I don't explain myself to them anymore. I categorically refuse, because you'll be there for years, and I'm not doing it. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I can't move from this because this is a full class and I've already come late. So I'm going to have to soldier this. And every few minutes, I'm doing my spin, and I'm feeling someone just looking. She's leering, and she's looking at how I'm pulling up the spin bike, the different levels. And every time she turns with her wet sweat, it's hitting me, because she's like eggs up. So every time she's turning to look at me, I feel her before I see her, because of the sweat, because of all the bodily fluids. I felt absolutely disgusting. And do you know what? Hindsight's a great thing, but looking back now, I should have just left the class. I should have, because number one, the pandemic is still alive and kicking. Number two, My OCD is so bad that by the time I did eventually get home, the type of shower I had, like almost half a bottle of Dettol, like literally, like in the bath. But I bring this here to say, policing black women Monday to Friday, and then policing black women on the weekend, is there no rest? Will they not rest? Even the Queen of England has a bank holiday. But my issue is there never a consideration from non-black people to actually acknowledge that, number one, you're not being helpful. You're being helpful to you, but the person you are rendering help to has not asked you. And sometimes it is actually really polite, not sometimes, all the time, to even say, oh, do you want any help, or can I just advise you about something, or can I just ask permission to help me? And I felt like I was being policed in a way that I recognised I'm policed Monday to Friday. And to be policed in that way was so intrusive that it was the right time and place for me to tell her to face her front. And I was very stern and very firm with what I said to her, because anything less than that would welcome her to continue that behaviour. It's controlling, it is disrespectful, because it is bloody rude. And actually, there comes a point where you just have to ask yourself, why is it always as black women we are having to put non-black people in their place? Because they think that their place is control. And it's rooted in racial stereotype, and it is rooted in control. It doesn't matter any way you want to flex it. That is what it is. This same day, listen, I keep telling everybody, I need my own reality show. Shibi, I've already been on a reality show already, Big Brother 2014, Google me. I need my own reality show, because literally I feel like I need a camera that follows me for you guys to see what I have to deal with as a black woman. Non-black people that listen to this podcast, you need to see what I deal with being a black woman, because my fellow black queens that are listening to this podcast, you guys, this is familiar to us, isn't it? Because this is how our existence is set up. So this very same day, because I go to Pure Gym in Beckton. So anyone that knows East London, Beckton, there is like a massive car park. It's like a retail park. It's not the best, but it'll do. There's a 24-hour Tesco's that I frequent all the time. It's my local Tesco's. And I went in there, and obviously I have been speaking about this water shortage for the last few months. And it's only now that everyone's starting to realise, oh my God, we've got no water. So any opportunity I have to go to Tesco's and I've got my car, I will always load my boot with water. So Sunday was no exception. So I was waiting in the queue, and I started loading the conveyor belt with my shopping. And I bought a packet of water. So that, you know, the big waters of 6, and I bought 3 of those. And I have worked in Tesco's before, yeah? During my undergrad uni days, I worked in Tesco's in Hendon. I don't know if it's still there, actually. It was a small Tesco's. Anyway, so I I remember these things that, you know, these big bottles of water, they usually have like a little label, and you can take the label off and you can hand it to the cashier and they'll scan it. So you don't then have to carry all the waters on the conveyor belt, particularly with the Evian waters. But with the Highland waters, they don't necessarily have the tags. I don't think they do, or at least I haven't seen them. And in this circumstance, I had to load up the water on the conveyor belts. They are heavy, but homegirl just came back from the gym, still had a bit of like adrenaline, so I was able to do it, and I loaded up my shopping. So as I'm loading up the conveyor belt, this Asian man who was on a separate queue in front of me for his own conveyor belt, he said to me, excuse me, you don't have to put all those waters there, you can just put one and she'll scan one for you, and then you just tell her you have 3. I said, excuse you. I said, can you mind your goddamn business? I said, what's your business about what I do with the water? What's it got to do with you? He goes, I'm just trying to help. I said, this helpful Harry. I just saw helpful Henrietta in the gym. Here's helpful Henry, or helpful Harry. Can you mind your business? I said, I didn't ask for your help though. I said, if you want to be helpful, you could have put these waters on a conveyor belt. I said, moreover, I didn't ask for your help. I said, what is this control? What is happening today where black women can't just operate in our existence peacefully? If we're not being controlled in the office, we're being controlled in the gym, and now we're being controlled in Tesco's. What you need to do is face your damn front and stop trying to control women in my community. Control the women in your own community. Focus on that. Don't focus on the black women in my community. You don't even know the reason why I have to put the water here. And in my head, I just was shocked. I was like, I've literally driven less than 2 minutes from the gym, and I was attempted to be micromanaged during a spin class, and now someone wants to micromanage me. What? In the where? God, no. And also, black women, let's be honest, we understand how it works when we go food shopping. You go to a self-checkout, you make sure you take your receipt, because you know that you may be stopped at the door. Not because of anything other than an overzealous security guard. It's the same things with the water. I have to think to myself, right, number one, I'm going to put it on the conveyor belt. Depending on who's on the cashier, you could be like, actually, do you know what? I've got 2 waters here. But I have learned through my own experience, just put everything on the conveyor belt. If they have issue, if anything, they'll advise you. Don't worry, put the rest back. I'll take this one. But it's for the cashier to direct me. That's how I look at it, because I've had so many situations whereby a security guard has stood at the front of the cashier desk and is just looking at me just because I am paying, or they want to see if I'm paying. And this is how we exist as black women, as black people. We know we have to police ourselves in the way we operate in certain spaces. So as this woman is doing my shopping, the cashier, she then said to me, she goes, what you did's a good thing, because we've got a lot of cameras here, and actually I don't have the code, but I would have wanted all of them here just to avoid any problems. I said, no problem at all. Do you understand? And then as I'm loading my trolley, I've paid, I turn around to the man, and his wife is there. I see his wife in front of him. So maybe she went off and then came back. And I just said, I come out of it. I said, so you've got a whole wife, but you're trying to control somebody else's wife. What? What in the misogyny is this? Because we all know that if I was with, number one, if I was with someone else, he wouldn't have done that. If I was with a man, he would not have done that. But as a woman on her own, he felt entitled to try to tell me what to do, and then masquerade it with help. It can't happen. It's not a coincidence that the white woman in Pure Gym masquerades her help, her control with help, and then I go into the Tesco's and an Asian man masquerades his control with help. I put it to you, a black man, because that would be his comparator, wouldn't do that. A black man would not say, excuse me, they don't mind your business. And the reason I'm bringing it here to the podcast is it's really important that we recognize what that is, because I think society conditions us to accept that as help, and it's not help. It's a microaggression. It is a microaggression, and it's rooted in racial prejudice. It's rooted in sexism, and it's rooted in control. And I guarantee you that white woman at the gym wouldn't have said it to a man. If I was a man, she wouldn't have said it to me. And as black women, we understand how we have to operate and exist in certain spaces. And I'm going to put something to you. You have to call it out, because I feel like the time of nervous laughter and awkwardness is past, because the nervous laughter and the awkwardness is like clapping for them to continue. And I'm not sitting here saying every situation you're going to have to, but there comes a point where you have to also acknowledge and call out the control that is attempted to be administered onto us as we exist in society. There's been a shift over the last 2 years. There has definitely felt a shift. And if you can't just go to a supermarket, load a conveyor belt, minding your own business. I had my whole mask on. I was just concentrating on paying for my stuff. But that's not enough. And the thing is, you call it out, they don't have anything to say, and then they look at you like you're crazy. No, you're crazy. Because instead of you to face your front, face your wife, face your conveyor belt, and face all the frozen packages on your conveyor belt, you're there policing my water. Are you kidding me or something? No. My fellow black queens, when we talk about advocating for yourself at work, it seems also we have to advocate for ourselves Saturday and Sunday, because these people don't know how to take a day off. And whilst I do not enjoy having to constantly advocate for myself, especially outside work, I definitely feel like I will do it, because if I didn't put this man in his place, I felt like he could have very easily come over to my conveyor belt and picked up the water and put it back in my trolley, because that's the vim and the energy he had. But do you have the same energy for your wife? Do you have the same energy in your home? Even if you do, keep that under wraps in your home. Don't bring that energy outside. It is violent, it is aggressive, and it's downright rude. And I will be calling it out anytime I feel like I'm being policed by anybody, but especially non-black people, being policed by non-black people. I'm not going to have it. You're policed when you go to the gym. You're policed when you go to the supermarket. Police when you go to the petrol station. You're policed when you're crossing the road. No, that's not how I'm going to operate. I'm not in bondage. None of us are in bondage. We pay our taxes just like everybody else. I recently paid a corporation tax bill of over £3,000. So ain't nobody going to tell me how to exist in society as I'm going about my business. That's not going to happen. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I pay my taxes, and I'm allowed to load my conveyor belt in a supermarket how I like. If I like, yeah, you know what? I can tip everything upside down and still load it on the conveyor belt. I will not accept being policed by anybody, especially a non-black person who I know is rooted in control, that is rooted in racism, and is rooted in racism, negative stereotyping connotations, prejudice. It's just rooted in control. And I just think non-black people need to understand that that control dynamic was abolished a long time ago. And as we navigate life, we need to be able to navigate life as free people, because we are free people. And why these non-black people think that we are not free people is above me. But what will happen is I will call it out. I don't care, because if I'm seeking peace as I operate in my life, and you're seeking to interrupt my peace, then I have to tell you what you're doing. Yeah, publicly. So those are the things I wanted to tell you. And I had a really good weekend. I actually went into Cartier. So those of you who do not know, my birthday is on the 6th of October. I am a Libra babe, and I don't typically celebrate my birthday, to be honest. And I mean, whenever I have done previously, I'm usually on the way to New York for my yearly New York trip. And obviously this year is different. Much of last year was different as well with the pandemic. And I understand that the US are opening their borders to the vaccinated in early November, but a date is yet to be agreed. And I just don't like the way that we are now being separated. It's really clear between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. I think the US have agreed it's only the vaccinated people who can travel the Americas. And I mean, I really don't think it's, for me anyway, my personal view is, it's really stupid to get vaccinated so you can travel without looking into the vaccine, what it means, what it consists of, and how often you will then have to continue to take this vaccine, which is actually a trial drug. I think it's a trial drug until 2023. And the lack of sufficient data doesn't fill me with much confidence. Therefore, as much as I love my yearly trips to America, I will not get vaccinated just to go there. I have to get assurances, and there are assurances that I'm seeking that my doctor has very honestly said that she can't give me. So knowing that, why would I then take a trial drug that my doctor can't wholeheartedly, categorically recommend, and can't tell me how I'm going to react to it, can't tell me how it will affect my internal organs, including my ovaries. She can't tell me anything. And a lot of people who I know have been vaccinated, double jabbed, have either caught COVID or have caught COVID and refused to then get a booster. So then what's the point? You know, if you're going to get vaccinated, only then to not get the booster, what was the point of getting vaccinated in the first place? But because a lot of the side effects that a lot of people I know have gone through as a result of the vaccine, either through the first jab or the second one, they're just refusing to get the booster. So it doesn't really fill me with confidence. And I definitely think that there is a lazy attitude within the government to actually update the side effects of these vaccines. We know, for example, there are many women who have complained about delayed periods or no periods at all. And that is not something that's being captured in detail. They'll reference interruption to menstrual cycle, but they won't go into detail. And it's a detail as a woman that we need, as women, that we need to know, especially because, number one, you know, for a lot of us who have underlying health issues like PCOS, endometriosis, or anything else, it's important that we're given all the facts so that we can weigh up our options. Recently as well, I saw in the press that there are 4 or 5 England football players who are unvaccinated and refuse to, and I hate when people say refuse to be vaccinated, because I don't think it's a refusal, it's a choice. And I did put a comment underneath a post, and I said, listen, It's not about, I said, when did we start policing and taking away people's freedom of choice? Whether they are role models or not, they still get the option to choose, the autonomy to make the decision of whether they want to be vaccinated or not. Being a role model doesn't equate to then getting a vaccine, because maybe for them the decision to get a vaccine is not responsible for them because they don't feel as though they got all the information. But calling people anti-vaxxers for not getting the vaccine, I think, is disproportionate. Because just because, take for instance, I haven't been vaccinated, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. That'd be ridiculous. I've had my malaria injections, I've had my BCG in school, I was vaccinated as a child. I just don't feel that I have adequate information to make an informed decision about getting the vaccine. Until I feel as though I have all the information available and therefore able to make an autonomous decision, I will not be vaccinated. So we're going to require, and I wrote this there, we're going to require the government to meet us halfway, give us information that we've requested, answer our questions, be transparent about the data, and allow us to make an informed decision. The pressure that the government is putting on people, the scaremongering, the press slurs, the separation of society between vaccinated and unvaccinated, only pushes people further away from getting the vaccine, where maybe they would have considered getting it. But what the government don't realise is you can put as many ads on, you can put as many black people in your ads, you can pay as many celebrities as you want. But as a society, we see what's happening. We know when we're being forced or pushed into a certain direction. And one thing that people thrive on is the ability to make their own choices. In making their own choices, it's not just about whether you're going to have brown bread or white bread in the morning. The choice is about your health and how you receive and access healthcare. I completely understand the argument about protecting people and lower NHS admissions, but the reality is people who are vaccinated, double jabbed, either singular or double jabbed, are also contracting COVID and are having really bad side effects. Now, they may not be hospitalised, but there are a percentage who are, and that is not being shared. We are seeing now a rise in infection rates with the children returning back to school, and I know there's going to be a push now from the government to have teachers vaccinated. And I know this because NHS workers, they're being forced to be vaccinated. So it's only a matter of time before they push this agenda now to teachers. And again, you remove the ability for people to make decisions, informed decisions. And rather than the government looking to educate people about the positives of maybe losing weight, taking your vitamin C, vitamin D, educating, allowing us to educate ourselves by asking questions. What they do is, no, you need it, you've got to get it. The harassment of emails, texts, you have to think to yourself, what is the agenda here? I'm no conspiracy theorist, but I didn't even realise that the NHS had my number, because these times when I'm chasing test results for blood tests, trying to get a doctor's appointment, I can't get it. But as soon as this vaccine's out, they're like, right, you're in the age group, we need you to get it. They'll be calling, texting, and there's no option to stop receiving these things. So very clearly, something is not right. And until I get to the bottom of it, I will not be vaccinated. So if it means I don't go on holiday for 10 years, so be it. So be it. Because what will happen is in a few years' time, and it's probably after the trial in 2023, we're going to hear all the stories that the press and the government have tried to hide to force people to get this vaccine. There are so many stories we still haven't heard of, but the ones we have heard of has been purely because we have access to social media. Can you imagine if you remove social media? The agendas being pushed by the media are not only dangerous, but they're divisive to society. And I have as far as I'm concerned, I don't judge anybody. I say, make a decision that is good for you, but make sure you're making the right decision, an informed decision, and a decision that has come from your decision making, not something that has been contaminated by the views pushed by others. That is what I would always say. And I think it's really important that I say that and I get that out, because I just think that the current agenda that I'm seeing is actually dangerously divisive. And if it continues, there will be a separation in society between the vaccinated and unvaccinated. And it's not going to bode well, So yeah, I wanted to say that. But I digress. So yeah, on the weekend went to Cartier. And for those of you who don't know, I actually got engaged on my birthday last year. So my birthday is also the anniversary of my engagement as well. And Kay said, oh, you know what, he wanted to take me to Cartier. And he surprised me with it, having tried to find my ring size by taking my iPad and then trying to go in, but he couldn't find it. So he ended up telling me. Anyway, we went down there. And I wanted to go to the Cartier in New Bond Street. Now, partly because I didn't know for certain if there was a Cartier in Selfridges. It wasn't very clear to me when I looked on Google. Maybe I'm just slightly slow. So we went to the Selfridges in Bond Street. And if you've been to New Bond Street, it's very bougie. It's not even bougetta. It's bougie with a capital bougie. And it's very like, I definitely feel like I don't belong down there. It's just so uppity in a way that is unnecessary, because all these shops were closed during the pandemic. So I don't know why they're acting like they're above. You're not above. You closed down too during the pandemic, and you're ringing around your customers trying to make sales. So where's your humility? And this is the problem, isn't it? A lot of stores now, they've lost their humility because they're open now and they're making profit. But as soon as we go into another lockdown, you'll see them quivering and shaking and start doing ads. You'll see ads pop up in your flipping Instagram pages. Anyway, and as we went into Cartier, well, I can't say go in. We went to the front of Cartier. A man came out with a clipboard and he says, "Have you got an appointment?" I says, "No. Was we supposed to?" He says, "Well, we're full inside and we're too full for you to wait inside. So you're going to have to wait out here, probably for 15 minutes. I said, "Is it probably or it is?" He goes, "Well, I don't know." And it was just the way he was very dismissive, very rude. As he's talking, he's looking me up and down. Listen, look me up and down. Not only did I look like a snack, I smelt like an expensive snack. I was ooded up. And I was looking at him, eyeball to eyeball. And he was like, "Oh, there's nothing I can do." And then it's pouring down with rain. There is no customer service, no etiquette. And Kay is a very chilled guy. And he was just looking, and I could see the look in his face like, what the hell? You know, it was just so unnecessarily rude. But it was a rudeness that suited the area because it's New Bond Street. So I said, "You know what? Don't worry. I'm going to go into Louis Vuitton." So as we're walking, Kay was like, "I'm really sorry, Toya. I don't want to spend my money in that shop. Maybe we go to another Cartier, but I'm not going into that one because they're just rude." And went into Louis Vuitton, came back out, and I turned and I could see Cartier from where I was standing, and there was now a queue. And Kay was like, "You know what? We need to spend our money where we're welcome," and we were definitely not welcome there. And I don't know whether it is because we're not dressed according to whatever standard they think is acceptable for Cartier New Bond Street, but whatever the case is, clearly they don't value us, and therefore we need to spend where we're celebrated. So I said, "All right, let's go Selfridges." He said, "No problem." So I went into Selfridges. And I haven't been to West End in almost 2 years, and I suspect it's probably the same amount of time that I haven't been to Selfridges. But Selfridges has a different atmosphere. It has a different, it's just different in there. And it's more bougetta than it is bougie. And it's a bougetta that I recognise because when we found the Cartier in Selfridges, there was a queue, but it wasn't a queue in the sense that, there's too many people inside. It was more that they wanted to control the numbers because of COVID, and they made that very clear. Obviously, Selfridges is indoors, so we weren't trapped in the rain or anything. And they were so lovely. As soon as we got to the front, they were like, "Oh, there might be a little bit of a wait, And they never took our names, and I wasn't sure what she was doing. But the security guard said, "Oh, don't worry, they write something down that enables us to identify you, so it's fine." The security guard came over, he said, "Oh, you guys are standing up." And Kay was like, "Oh, could we get a seat?" The guy went out of his way, got 2 posts for us to sit on. And then when there was some people that were sitting on the chairs, they left, we were able to take their chair, we were offered water, they were treated with such respect. And they made my Cartier experience amazing. So I do want to shout out Thomas. And Thomas is a deputy manager in Cartier. And he is lovely. He has so much knowledge about jewellery, obviously about the Cartier brand. And the way he kind of treated me and dealt with me and Kay was beautiful, and it was lovely from start to finish, and I really enjoyed it. Because of his customer service, I'm already planning my next Cartier purchase. Like, do you know what I mean? And I think that for me, and I know for Kay, spending there was fine because we were celebrated. Like, I felt like, number one, I made a really good investment in a piece that I really wanted, but also we walked away feeling happy. You could see the smiles on our faces, and he made it a priority to center us in our purchase in the way that you should do when you are spending a heck of a lot of money in a store. But I definitely think that it's important that I bring this here because, you know, when we talk about spending in our community and things like that, you know, for me, I really wanted a Cartier, but it's more than just spending in our community. There are things that we want to purchase that we in our community do not have. But if we are going to purchase outside of our community, there needs to be rules of engagement. It needs to be, where are we celebrated? And I wanted to come here and say, hi everybody, we are celebrated in Cartier in Selfridges, because that's where I felt celebrated. And actually, as Kay was paying, looking around, there was other black people in there, and you could see the smiles on their faces as well, and it was nice, and everybody you could see was just like happy to be in Cartier, lovely, you know, ambiance, and every person that was working there seemed lovely. So if you want to purchase Cartier, if you're interested and you want to feel celebrated, then I definitely recommend Cartier in Selfridges. Lovely, lovely, lovely. So let's move on to what we have gathered here to talk the things. So, like I said, when I knew I wanted to do this episode, I number one had to think about what it was that I wanted to talk about here. But also I need to speak to my therapist as well, because I wanted to make sure that I was ready to have this type of conversation. And I'm going to do this as a 2-part episode, because the second episode, I want to give you guys an opportunity to ask me questions, and we can cover maybe some more topics, but answer your questions as well. But for this episode, I want to talk about mummy issues. And I put my hands up and say, I definitely have I say mama, because that's how I refer to my mum, but mummy issues. And even the title is so endearing, isn't it? You know, mummy is such an affectionate way to address one's mother. Mother, I found, you know, when you use the word mother, it's quite stoic in its sound. You know, the word mummy it feels like there's a lot more affection there. You know, I've made no pretense about how difficult my relationship has been with my mum, and I think it reached a head when I was 21 years old. I'd finished uni, moved back home, and it was very evident to me that I wasn't welcome there. My relationship with my mum had never really been the best anyway, but my dad always kind of played referee. I think going to uni and living on campus gave me respite, and I think I forgot how bad it was, because I lived on campus for like 2 years and then got like a shared property in my 3rd year. So when I moved back home, when I think about it now, I was filled with dread. Now, to give you guys some context, I'm the oldest girl, the only girl, and I definitely have felt the weight of what that is, you know, the weight of being the first, almost like the family guinea pig, and if it goes wrong, it goes wrong, but we'll get it right with the next child, is definitely how I always felt. When I had to leave home at 21, I held a lot of resentment, because 21 is not an age to be leaving home as far as I was concerned. And it wasn't like I was leaving home to my own property. I left home and I got a council property. I was very clear that my mum wanted me out, because that's what she told me. So before I actually acquired my own property, I had to live in council accommodation. And I was living on the Broadwater Farm Estate. And those of you who know and understand the Broadwater Farm Estate, it's no place for a 21-year-old woman at all. And believe me, I had a few situations until, you know, I had to get like relatives involved to make it clear that I'm not on my own. But I was on my own, and it was uncomfortable and sometimes testing. My environment was very I'd say the environment that I lived in, the only safe place was in my flat, my small cockroach infested flat. Yeah, the stories are true. My particular flat had cockroaches, and I didn't even realise until 3 months after living in there. It was the backdrop to what happened, subsequently being able to acquire a property and leave there, and I thank my dad for always being there. And I definitely recognise him being caught in the middle between me and my mum. I mean, who do you, and you shouldn't say side, but it's true, who do you side with, your daughter or your wife? But I know he tried his best that it wouldn't be that way, but that's what it was. I lost out on a lot of family time. I lost out on saving. I lost out on actually maturing within the safety net of my family. And whilst I look back and I think probably leaving home at that age was probably the best thing I ever did, it also wasn't the greatest. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the greatest, because it didn't give me the opportunity to safely grow and make mistakes within a family setting. I had to grow up really quickly because I had bills to pay. I had electricity to put on. Every time I left my house, I was worried about coming home. I remember one time I woke up, got ready to go to work, and as I went downstairs, there were these yellow cones everywhere on the floor, down, like you open the door and literally in front of the entrance door, because somebody had been shot. And I continued going, and you know, that being normalized as your environment, and then you come home and you think, crap, when I get home it's going to be dark, like what am I going to walk into? And that was my reality at the age of 21. That was just not an age to be experiencing that. Have I made peace with that? I think I have, because I was very clear to my mum, mid to late 20s, about the effects that had on me, because I also had a stalker as well. I had to get a restraining order. Listen, it was horrible. It was horrible, and I was very, very, very vulnerable. And I did all of that, going to court, like the police officer that was amazing with this case when I was being stalked. She was just amazing. And I did all of that by myself. I didn't even tell my family until I got the restraining order, because I was living on my own. I was quote unquote independent. So for me, it was like, what's the point in telling you? It's not like you're going to do anything, because really and truly, doing something would mean being at home. But at home was intolerable, because my mum made it so difficult for me to just exist in myself and just to grow, you know. Anyway, topic for another day. When I think about my relationship with my mum, I think about constantly trying to buy affection and constantly trying to be accepted. My imposter syndrome, I think, started at home, because I never really felt like I fitted in. I was, you know, when you threaten a child that you're going to kick them out, you're basically telling them you don't want them. Therefore, they feel like they don't belong. And there is the seeds of imposter syndrome, where you feel like, should I even be here? Why am I here? You know, do I deserve to be here? That type of behaviour. It's crazy, because I definitely feel like there is this thing within our culture where even talking about a difficult relationship is almost shamed. As soon as you say you've got a difficult relationship with your mum, the finger pointing that you must be the problem. And I'm just going to sit here and tell you now, you are not the problem. There may be things that you have done or do, because no one's perfect, but you are not quote unquote the problem. There is this generational thing in our parents' generation whereby they think they can't make mistakes, and the inability to take responsibility for one's actions is completely out of the window. You see, culture, religion dominate a lot of our parents' thinking into believing that not only are they always right, but they always know best. I realised a long time ago that my mum, for the purpose of this episode, we're talking about my mum, right? Because my mum and dad are humans, but my mum's human. And she does make mistakes. But the difference is she doesn't admit them. And where she doesn't admit them, she fools herself into believing that she's always right. And all that does is it pushes me further and further away from her. I realised that at one stage of my life, because I wanted to be accepted so badly by my mum, I just wanted to feel loved by her. I would buy her affection. So I'd buy her things that I couldn't afford, I'd buy. And when I say I couldn't afford, I remember one time I took out a credit card just to buy my mum something, because for the 10 minutes in which she would receive it, I would be the best daughter in the world. I would be called all the pet names. I would be loved. I would feel loved. I would feel like, oh, finally, this is it. I'm going to be accepted. And then as I grew older, I realised no matter what I do, no matter how many things I bought to try and buy this love that obviously that I could never buy, I would never be any closer to being accepted or wanted or feeling loved by my mum. You know, there is this very toxic thing our parents say or allude to, if they don't say it clearly, is that we're their retirement plan or we're their investment. But the problem with the parents of that generation is They try and cash in on that investment when the child is still struggling. After the child has gone through the trauma of being your child, you then are trying to cash in while that child is still struggling to make something for themselves. As soon as they are in a position to earn money, you're already cashing in. So we're not even setting the foundation to teach the child financial literacy. We're not even in a situation now where the child understands responsibility. The responsibility that you've levied on them is to pay you back for mothering them. And that is toxic. It's so toxic. It's unbelievably toxic. So what I would do is I would never tell my mum how much I earned. I would lie and say I had no money. I would lie to be able to have money, to treat myself, to save. I would have to lie. Because if I were to tell her anything or tell her I've got a job, the following week it will be, I can't do this, or I can't pay this. And it's not that. It's the fact that you think that I should do those things. But again, I always say, if parents fully understood what it is to actually really support and love on your child the way that support and love should be, healthy, your child would naturally do those things anyway. Because your natural instinct as a child would be, my mum has done so much for me, I want to do something for them. It's really easy to demonize the female child, especially when you are in a household where there are also boys, because of the relationship. And it's a stereotypical relationship, but follow me here. The sons and their mothers have a different type of relationships to mothers and daughters, and I think we can all agree on that. But sons are very protective of their mother. Number one, my mother carried them for 9 months, the way they look at their mother. But in those situations, it's then easy to demonize the daughter. I definitely have felt that in my own situation. And what that has done is when my father died, it made me feel like the odd one out. So imagine already having the imposter syndrome that I told you about earlier. And then the one person that made you feel seen and visible has died. I definitely felt rejected. I felt like, do you know what? I felt like I wasn't needed anymore. I was only valuable if I can financially aid and support. But outside of that, I definitely think the feeling of feeling used and that feeling of feeling used has followed me. Because I definitely feel how my fractured relationship with my mum affects my ability to connect with people. It takes me a while to connect with people. If I see people or, get to know somebody and they have traits of my mum, I will run for the hills. I'm not even going to do it. And I think it's because I'm still dealing with the ramifications of that toxicity. And I think it's going to take years for me to fully work through those issues. I always say that there are mothers that know how to mother children, but not all mothers know how to mother children and how to mother adults. My mum hasn't got the capacity to understand how to mother adults because she still sees us as children, and therefore she still treats us that way. But when I was a child, you treated me really badly, and you're still trying to do that now as I'm an adult. My mum doesn't have the ability to fully understand the trauma that I've gone through in the way that she's mothered me. To be demonized by your own mother is difficult, especially when I know what I have done. And entitlement is a bastard. I'm going to tell you this now. Entitlement is a bastard. And our families feel very much entitled. Our mothers feel very much entitled. Because you gave birth to me doesn't mean that you're entitled to cause me trauma or to draw tears from me or to tell me I'm hopeless, I'm useless, I won't amount to anything, I'm going to need you. Get out at the age of 21. How does that then equate to I'm showing you love? That's not love. When my therapist explained what love is, like what actual love is in terms of mother and daughter, I realised, and I had to be confronted with the fact that the only love I've received from my mother was as a child. But as I became an adult, I didn't receive love. What I received was toxicity. And I recognised that our parents have their own traumas that they will never talk about, because some of them don't even recognise them as traumas. But our parents have had their own experiences and they haven't been brought up in the society that we have. I mentioned it last week and I'm going to mention it again, listening to the Receipts podcast, when Audrey said, that she had to sit down and have a conversation with her mum to understand, Mum, how did you come to the country? Like, how did you know to do this? How did you know to do that? And when I listened to Audrey say this, I thought to myself, I've never been able to have that conversation with my mum, because number one, she's not going to be honest with me. Number two, she doesn't know how to be vulnerable, and she doesn't have the capacity to fully understand why I would be asking those questions. So it would be constantly combative. How can you wake up in the morning and be combative? You just wake up, your eyes open, boom, you want to fight. Someone asks you to say good morning to you, you want to fight. Like, that is some internal issues. And in going to therapy, I recognised that I had to do the work. Initially, it was to do the work because I wanted a better relationship with my mum. But what I realised is I could only take that therapy so far, because unless my mum was willing to do therapy with me, we couldn't mend the relationship. But in order for her to do the therapy with me, my mum would have to be honest with the therapist. And maybe me stepping out of the room or whatever, but my mum doesn't have that ability because she's not honest with herself. And I think a lot of people in my mum's generation don't have the ability to be honest with themselves because that honesty is too much for them. And I'm not making an excuse, I'm just being honest. I don't hate my mum, but I dislike her. And I dislike her because of the way she has treated me. Because when I look at mothers and daughters, I know that I can never attain that. I can never attain a healthy relationship because my mum refuses to accept responsibility for anything. And I know that what I need to be able to progress that relationship is an acceptance of responsibility. I don't want an apology. The acceptance of responsibility is the apology, because the changed behaviour will flow from that. I often have a fear that where I've chosen to separate myself, that if something was to happen to my mum, would I be able to forgive myself? And the answer is yes, because I feel like I have tried everything possible to mend that relationship. I've tried everything possible to work through the problems in that relationship. And I've done the work to also parent myself. I have to parent myself at the age of 16. I have to parent myself at the age of 18. Parent myself at the age of 21. Parent myself at the age of 25. Parent myself at the age of 29. At those critical points of my life, I know what was happening where I needed my mother present and she was absent. So I am now constantly, at any one time, parenting myself at any one of those ages, depending on what is triggered. I know that a lot of people in our culture will say and admit that one of the fears that we have had, and I know definitely I had, is how do you get into a relationship and explain to the person that you're with that you have a really detrimentally toxic relationship with your mum? It's severed and broken, and actually continuing this relationship with your mum is only going to mentally harm you. The typical misogynistic male will basically make it like you're the problem, or oversimplify what the issue is, or trivialize it. And the way I decided to tackle it was to be honest. I just told Kay the truth. This is the truth. And I think at first he didn't appreciate how bad it was until he started to see the effects on my mental health. And then he had his own personal experience where he was able to be front and centre in understanding a fraction of what I've had to deal with from the age of 21. Knowing fully that my bad relationship with my mum probably started, I'd say, when I was about 16, 17. But when I say 21, is because 21 was the shift where I physically did something about it. And it could have ended really, really badly. My life could have taken a different turn. And I thank God and I thank my ancestors for covering me. But even before I knew the importance of my ancestors were there. And to be able to sit here in front of you and talk about this, I'm telling you right now, it hasn't been easy because I've had a lot of work to do. To be able to have introspection, to be able to fully accept what the issues are, there's been a lot of work. And when I say a lot of work, there's also been a lot of money spent to do the work, because therapy is not free. And finding the right therapist, I knew that I didn't want a black woman as a therapist. Controversial. But I knew for me that in order for me to fully open up, I don't want to then look at this black woman and see my mum, because that's exactly what I would see. My second therapist was an Asian woman, and that is where a majority of my therapy took place. The Asian woman fully understood culture and fully understood, and she really took the time to research Nigerian Igbo culture. Not fully accepting, obviously, she will never fully understand it, but being an Asian woman, there is a mutual understanding of what culture is and how that culture then exists in Western civilization. And my last therapist is a white woman, and that had a different dynamic as well. But it's a dynamic that worked, because that was where now I was putting into practice a lot of the work that I had done. I was putting into practice certain things to be able to move forward. So it worked for the white female therapist that I then had. I do also want to talk about a bit more about the imposter syndrome, because I would never have thought that I had imposter syndrome until I started to really deep dive in therapy. I remember having to admit to my brother that I didn't know how to swim, and he was really surprised. He was like, "Well, we used to go swimming every Saturday with Dad. Like, I saw you," and he stopped and he goes, "You're right, I never actually saw you swim." I said, "I never did." And every Friday when we'd go with school, I found a way to kind of get out of it or do the bare minimum, but I never actually swam. I said, I have a fear of drowning, because I always felt as a black person, because I was young then, that I couldn't swim because I couldn't float. And that fear is a warped understanding of how swimming actually works. So I made a conscious decision as an adult to learn how to swim. And I am going to repost a picture or a video on Tuesday. So Tuesday the 5th of October, I'm going to post a video of me swimming on holiday. And it was the first time, having learned how to swim, I was challenged by my swimming instructor to swim at the pool where me and my friend went on holiday. And it was something that I was working towards. It was a mini challenge, and I did it. And I remember telling my mum, so it was before I actually went on that holiday. So I'd been learning to swim for about 10 months before, about 6 or 10 months before I actually went on holiday and put it into practice. And I remember telling my mum, I'm learning how to swim, and I said, it's really good because it allowed me to lose the weight. And she goes, "Oh, you're learning to swim. Are you sure you won't sink to the bottom because you're so fat?" I said, "Pardon?" She goes, "I said, are you sure you will not sink to the bottom because you are so fat?" And I kind of laughed it off in the normal way that I do, in the normal way that I have learned what my toxic trait is. Because I've got a couple of toxic traits, but that was the main one, whereby I laugh things off and I bury my head. That's a toxic trait, because all I'm also doing is burying the emotion that comes with that thing that she has said. And I felt very self-conscious in that conversation, because in my head, I was thinking, hang on, so my mum thinks I'm so fat that I would sink to the bottom. And even if she didn't think that, how is that encouraging me on my journey to learn how to swim? How is that encouraging? Why is my weight a joke to something that I'm trying to combat, that fear that I'm trying to get over? Why is my weight being used as a weapon against me, as a joke about something that I am trying to learn, which is considered a life skill? And I never challenged my mum on it. I literally, I had this awkward laugh, and I can hear it in my head. And I had this sinking feeling. And I thought, I'm just never going to talk to her about my swimming again. And I went off on holiday, did my swimming and whatever. And that was an accomplishment and achievement for me. But on my way home from my mum's house on that day, I had to parent the 21-year-old Toya. Because the 21-year-old Toya is the one that had the imposter syndrome. Because at that age, I was made to feel like I'm not good enough. I wasn't good enough to continue living in the family home. I was basically kicked out. And I didn't feel good enough. Fast forward then, in my 30s, learning how to swim and being told, you can't possibly do that because you're too fat to do that. You will sink to the bottom if you do that. And that being the butt of the joke. Some people may say, well, it's just a joke, but how is that just a joke? How? How does that equate to a joke? Why does the jokes require me to be at the bottom? Why does the jokes require me to feel inadequate? What type of joke is that? My dad always said is when someone says a joke and the only person that's laughing is the person telling the joke, it becomes an insult. And that's exactly how it felt. But again, I was still developing the skills to understand how to deal with my relationship with my mum. I hadn't then dealt with how I deal with those situations. And now, like further along, I recognize that one of my toxic traits is burying my head in the sand. You know, my friends that know me very well know that I can be quite passive. Like there's things I'll just be like, whatever. And sometimes I do that to the wrong things, because for me, sometimes it's easier to not deal with it and focus on what I believe is important. And it's only been, I'd say, in the last year that I've realised that I'm not going to do that anymore, because when I'm passive, I allow people, the past, to feel like they can do what they want. They don't respect that passiveness, i.e. me disengaging. And actually burying my head in the sand means that I'm not actually dealing with whatever it is that is causing me to feel a certain way. And I'm not prioritising my feelings. And it comes from also having a relationship with my mum where my feelings have never felt very valid. I've always been told that my feelings don't make sense, or they're not valued, or they're not considered, or they're rubbish. And I have been told those things. So when you grow up with that understanding, when you are then confronted with emotions, you haven't then developed the skill of how to deal with those emotions. So for me, what I had developed was burying those emotions. But then how many times can you bury something before you just have a pothole of emotions scattered everywhere? And what that does is it builds resentment and anger. And remember, I've said this before, I used to have a really, 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 really bad temper. In fact, I would say that I used to, because I haven't seen that temper for a long time. And it's because I've had to work at understanding what sits behind that temper. And what sat behind the temper is not being able to express myself, or being told that my feelings were invalid. You know, our first example of femininity, womanhood, or of a woman is your mother, your nurturer, your carer, the person that gave birth to you. That is the first example you have as a woman. And this person, who is an important figure in your life, is basically telling you your emotions are not valid. You take that into the world. So when my therapist would say to me, "How are you?" She said to me, I develop a technique of not actually saying how I am, but being very surface level. But being very surface level has always been accepted as how I feel. And she had to keep challenging me until I got comfortable with explaining how I felt. I feel upset because of XYZ. Rather than say, yeah, I feel upset today, but then I did this and da-da-da-da. That's not me telling you how I feel. I'm just telling you that this is what it is. I'm keeping it surface level. But actually saying, I feel like, because, and as a result of, and I had to learn that skill in therapy. And it's a continuous thing that I have to continue to develop, because when you've been conditioned a certain way, i.e. not to express emotion, not know how to express emotion, because that's it, isn't it? Understanding how and feeling safe enough to, you then develop techniques to avoid. So I basically developed avoidance techniques. And it meant that then having relationships with friends, romantic relationships would never work, because I lacked the communication skills required in those relationships to reasonably communicate affection. I remember in one of my friendships, I was told that I'm very cold. You're warm with a group, but you're cold individually, I was told. And when I look back now, I completely agree with it, because I hadn't developed the skill to even understand that I was like that. Going through therapy made it very clear to me. Unlearning those healthy behaviours has been, I think, the biggest challenge of therapy. The unhealthy behaviours that one develops as a result of a toxic relationship with your mother. But being honest enough to identify what those toxic things are. I think that I have the ability to just cut people off. I will just cut you off and I feel nothing. I'll just cut it. Especially when I feel as though you have overstepped a mark that I have warned you that you continue to overstep. My therapist said to me, it's not toxic, it's self-preservation. And if somebody knows you really well, they won't allow you to get to that point. And cutting people off is toxic if it's your coping mechanism. But if it's for preservation, it's not toxic, especially when the alternative is a full showdown, because also having a full showdown isn't actually healthy. It's not a healthy mode of communication, is what I have learned through therapy. And I'll be honest with you, when I look back on some of my relationships, and I say friendship relationships where I've had to cut people off and walk away, it's because they've exhibited something that I saw in my mum, and I tried to sound the warning that I can't accept this, and it was ignored in the same way my mum ignored my feelings. So the only way to deal with it is then to walk away, because I don't want to have the argument, because it is very draining to have to go into the real foundation of how I feel. I don't feel as though I should have to do that. I think that as individuals, we set the boundaries of and the perimeters in which we engage with people and develop friendships, and I think there has to be a healthy investment in each other to fully understand a person in a way that I don't think I will ever understand my mum, because it requires her to show up as herself and to show up in honesty, and I don't think my mum has the capacity to do that, because her generation haven't been taught or advised or been made to feel like they can. So they will talk to you like you're 4 years old, because as far as they're concerned, you are the child. But you don't stay a child. A child doesn't stay a child. They mature into an adult. So my question is, if you're still talking to me like a child, when are you going to start talking to me like an adult? And I did ask my mum that, and she told me I was being rude. I wasn't being rude. I'm asking you because I need to set my own expectation of when you would start treating me as the adult I am. Whenever I have sought to discuss certain topics, like on social media, it has always been somebody from my community who seeks to stop me and will police me. Oh, that's not a nice thing to say, or I don't know if you should say that. And I have challenged it each and every time and told the people to shut up. Shut up. You don't get to police how I speak about my trauma, because it belongs to me and I'm working through it. And actually, in speaking about it, I know that there are a lot of women out there that have been able to relate, to feel free that they're also not the only one. And it has been cathartic to be able to be honest about certain things, because equally for me, knowing that it's not just me allowed me to accept that this may be a generational thing. And going through therapy and understanding that I'm not the only one has given me the ability to give my mum grace, in that there are so many things that I will never talk about because they're private, and because I do think there are certain things that one should keep to oneself, or at least keep with one's therapist. But in showing my mum grace, what I am going to say is that my mum is an amazing mother to children. I had a very, very, very good childhood. I never knew that we were lacking, and my mum is naturally a good mother to a child. I think as soon as I started developing an identity of my own, it became a problem. Something that somebody messaged me on my Snapchat stories a couple of years ago said, how much of a toxic relationship with a mother is rooted in jealousy? ? And this is what I'm going to say. A lot of our parents have come over as first generation immigrants. A lot of our mothers, first generation immigrants. And a lot of our mothers have come here looking for a better life. And we ourselves as young adults have gone through so much in a society that have made it very clear that we are othered or we don't belong. And our parents have come over here as first generation immigrants to start a life afresh. And that must have been really hard, really difficult. And there were some opportunities that our parents did not have the opportunity to utilise, where we have. And I think unconsciously, subconsciously, there is resentment there. Because had our parents been given at least 10% of the opportunities that we had, I think their stories would be a lot different. And I think they know that. And this is why they push us in different areas of our life. But it's weird. It's like they push us, they want us to have a better life, and that's why they've made the sacrifice. But when we go down that direction, there is a resentment. And I understand it in a way, and understand it from the perspective of, it's so important to me to live a full life, to have certain experiences, for me to really fully utilize all the opportunities that I have been able to afford myself by making those sacrifices. And that is really important for me. But I've had to consider that that is also would have been also important to my mum, and she just didn't have those opportunities. And I think if I was to sit down with people from my mum's generation and say, have you had a full life? I don't think many of them can say that they have had, because then I would question, what do you consider a full life? And I think when you start digging beneath the surface of what a full life means, I think we'll soon realise that a lot of our parents haven't reconciled themselves with a lot of their trauma, things that they've lost and sacrifices they have made. And whilst they want the best for their children, they also wanted the best for themselves as well, and haven't realised those things. And sometimes when you look back in your life and you think, like for me, I always say I've lived a very full life. You know, I've been able to do certain things. I've had many, many experiences. But I know that when my mum was my age, she didn't have those things. And actually, I think that those are the things that she craved the most, but she just didn't have the opportunity. And this is why I think that I always saw it as my responsibility to give back to my mum. But then when that was weaponized against me, it was then difficult for me to do those things. So it's like a cycle, isn't it? And I do definitely recognize that despite how I have been treated, how I continue to be treated, having done the work, doing the work and continuing to learn and grow, I recognize that I also give myself grace, in that I don't have to see the grace in others. I don't actually have to, but we choose to, because we know that in the pursuit of what is right and what is good, it's important to understand that we have to put on the lens of other people. But equally, you don't deserve to go through trauma, or to continue trauma, or to continue the cycle of trauma. And the guilt that one feels, like I felt a lot of guilt that I didn't get on with my mum. I felt a lot of guilt that I wasn't good enough and that there was something wrong with me. But then when it started to break me mentally, I realised that the guilt I was feeling, it wasn't actually guilt. It was guilt that I hadn't spoken up at a certain time. Guilt that I wasn't good enough. It was a guilt that I had no control over. That's what I'm trying to say. I think that expectation is a bastard. You know, when you expect things, you know, there's a stereotype about mothers, then you place that expectation on your own mother. That's a problem, because when we place those expectations on our mothers, we're not actually assessing if they have the capacity to deliver on that expectation. And what happens is then you become crushed, because you have built up this expectation that has not been realised, and that builds resentment. And I definitely think I'm guilty of that. I think that I had expectations of my mum that were far, 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 far greater than the capacity that she would have. And I know some people are probably listening to this podcast thinking, Toy, are you not worried about like what your mum would think? And I'm not actually, because I don't think I've said anything here that I haven't said to her, or anything here that is contentious, because the purpose of this episode is to give grace to the daughters in a way that we have never been given grace before. There are so many things that I have gone through with my mum that if I was to speak about it, to be honest with you, even speaking about it outwardly, outside of a therapist, is too much for me, if I'm being honest. There are certain things that I have to work through in private, and I've accepted that. I know that, I understand that, and I'm good with that. But it's important that we then have to find the middle ground between sharing and talking about these things, and then being able to also work through certain things privately. I definitely feel as though this weekend, if you listen to my Instagram stories, Sunday, I was like, one of my friends messaged me and she was like, Toy, you're on crud today. I was on crud, but I was really triggered on Saturday, and I didn't realise it was the root of that trigger was my mum. I didn't realise it, and let me explain. So on Saturday, I mentioned that I was on Sunday that I was going to Cartier, whatever, and on Saturday I had posted when I was in Selfridges, and then I received a message on Instagram, and the person basically said, oh, remember when you was on job seekers allowance and now, you know, you're in Cartier. This is very inspiring. And on the surface, you'd think, oh, that's a compliment. It's not. That's a really backhanded compliment. I don't need anyone to remind me where I came from or my story, because it's my story. I told you the story, so I don't need you to tell me. What keeps me humble is my beginnings. I know where I've come from. And believe me, when I tell you, it's entrenched into the fabric of who I am. When I'm giving public when I'm giving public talks or when I'm having conversations, I hold my background like a badge of honor, from the lows to the highs. So when somebody thought to remind me that I used to be on job seekers and now I'm in Cartier, it's not as simple as that, darling. There was a lot of sacrifices, there was a lot of struggle, there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of starvation to get to that point. And it was almost like, again, policing black women and luxury and policing our joy and policing the things that we want to do because we want to do them. But when I actually thought about why I got really annoyed at that, it was because, you know, growing up, I never really got compliments outside of my dad. And I really craved them from my mum. And it's that acceptance and that recognition. It was the need to be complimented and get that. You know, if I got that, I didn't care what anybody else thought. And it reminded me of a situation with my mum whereby I didn't get, it was a compliment laced with, it was like a backhanded compliment laced with microaggressions. And I've never understood why somebody would, you know, compliment with the left and take back with the right. I've just never understood it. And feel comfortable that it's okay to do that. And it just reminded me of a situation with my mum, and I got really annoyed about it. And I did take it to Snap, and I spoke about it, and on Instagram I spoke about it, because I think it's also important that we call these things out. Why is it that when we are going through the suffering, nobody wants to remind us we're suffering because they are comfortable in seeing us suffering? You know, some people are committed to keeping you poor. You know that, innit? Okay, cool. That's another episode. But now that I am enjoying the fruits of my labour, and that's labour with a capital labour. You want to remind me that I was on job seekers allowance. Was you there with me? I was there by myself, darling. I was the one walking from my house to the job centre to go and claim benefits. I was the one that was walking back home exhausted, tired. It was me walking through... Now you have like them dual carriageways and they have the places where the pedestrians could walk. I had to do that. It was me that had to make a decision between 6 chicken wings or a sanitary towel. That was me. So I don't need anyone to come and police me about my happiness. And it just reminded me with my relationship with my mum, not really being able to fully enjoy certain things because I didn't know what the judgment would be, or I didn't know if I was allowed to, or I didn't know if it would give rise to more friction, or there would be the undertone of resentment or even jealousy for that matter. I didn't know. So when that person made that underhanded backhand comment, it kind of took me to that place. And it made me realize, or I realized on Sunday, that clearly that I'm affected by the fact that I know I will never, ever, ever get the recognition from my mum that the 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 21-year-old, 25-year-old and 29-year-old Toya craves. That's not going to happen. And I have to parent the younger me to understand that won't happen. And that's very difficult because I've never been a parent before. So I'm now learning to parent through therapy. And I think people don't understand the significance of the things they say to people or what it triggers. And I've been through so much and I'm tough, but equally toughness doesn't mean that I don't have feelings. I really want to be clear, if I haven't already, as to why I'm doing this episode. I'm doing this episode because there are very many black women like me who have gone through so much with our mothers and have been made to feel like we're the problem or been demonized and been judged. And it is almost acceptable that father and son can have daddy issues, and that's acceptable in society. It's not seen as, it's not seen as blame. But mummy issues is seen as the daughter has the problem. And I don't know whether it's rooted in misunderstanding, a commitment for society to misunderstand it, or whether it's just rooted in just pure ignorance. And as I sit here before you, about to celebrate another year of life, I do have to be honest that I know that my relationship with my mum will never, ever, ever be the relationship of mother and daughter. I know that I have lost the ability to trust. I've lost the ability to crave and want it. I'm so disappointed that I know that all I can do is work on, unlearn, and make sure that I am developing the capacity to be compassionate towards my mum. I think that needs to be my focus. And if one day my mum decides that she's willing to have a frank conversation, I now understand what my therapist says when she says you can't completely close the door. And when I remember my childhood, it's fond memories. So that's where I find the grace to be compassionate. There are people that I have spoken to, black women like myself, who have said to me that they've had to completely walk away from their relationship with their mum. Their mum's not in their life. The mum never came to their wedding. And one lady said to me, you have to accept that your mum may not come to your wedding, and you need to prepare for that now. And this was like 2 years ago. And here I am now having to prepare for that. Because a wedding requires you to center the bride. It requires you to center that person. But then if you've never done it before, how are you able to center the person when the person is basically embarking on the biggest thing of their life? I will continue to do the work. I will continue to stand in my truth and be honest with myself, where my flaws are, where they sit and why. And I will continue to try to be better and try to continue to evolve into the woman that I have been created to be. I do want to say that I know there is a lot of women out there who have difficult, traumatic, and often toxic relationship with their mothers. And I do want to offer two things. The first thing I want to offer is the opportunity for you to write into me. And if there is something you want me to talk about based on this topic, your anonymity will be protected, and I will do my very best to answer what you've put in the dilemma. So email hello@toytalks.com, and I will discuss whatever it is that you want me to discuss in relation to your dilemma on the podcast in part 2. I don't know when part 2 will happen, but it depends also on you if you guys want a part 2. Secondly, I'm going to encourage you to download the Mother and Daughter Masterclass on the toytalks.com website. And I will say that you're not alone. I completely understand. I completely get it. And there is a lot of work that we have to do to work through trauma, and also recognize that certain things within our personalities have come from that difficult relationship. And what I will say is we're never going to understand what our parents went through when they came here or when they were growing up, unless they tell us. So a majority of our parents will never ever be honest enough with themselves, let alone honest with us, to tell us. But we can read between the lines and form our own opinions. And I'm going to tell you what my therapist said to me. Don't completely close the door, but keep the door ajar enough that you can do the work and heal behind that door, while still giving grace to your mum if she wants to walk through the door. I'm going to leave you guys with that. Yeah, I'm going to leave you guys with that. So I'm going to leave this topic here, and I want to move on to a couple of other things. So we've got a couple of dilemmas. I'm going to read them out. But firstly, I want to touch on something that happened last year, August. So I had a smear test last year, August, and I have my regular smear tests. I can't remember how often it is, but I always get the alerts anyway. and my results came back as abnormal. I had abnormal cells. So from the beginning of doing smear tests to now, I've never had abnormal cells. And when you have abnormal cells, they say to you, rather than 3 years, you have to come back a year later. And if the cells are still abnormal, then you have to go have further investigation. So for the last year, at the back of my mind, my heart has been pounding, because I know that I have cancer in my family, the unknown of what these abnormal cells are, and just like not being able to, I felt like not being able to fully just exist, knowing that I have to wait a whole year to do another smear test. So a couple of weeks ago, I had to have my follow-up smear test, because it was a year later, and it was a little bit later, like 2-3 weeks out. Long story, but you know how it is getting an appointment here with the doctors. And so I had my smear test again, and the results came back as normal. And there was just this relief that I felt, because I just kind of felt like I can't deal with having to go through an investigation. I didn't know what that could be or what it could entail. And whilst I have been on and off my journey of weight loss and being a bit more healthy, I've always had it at the back of my mind that I need to be conscious of the fact that these cells are unhealthy or abnormal. But to get the results and find out that the cells are now normal is a relief. But I can't receive those results without encouraging you ladies to please take your regular smear tests. If you feel like too long a period has gone by, then contact your doctors, contact your nurses or healthcare professionals. You need to do it, because Jade Goody, who was a former Big Brother housemate, one of the biggest Big Brother housemates actually, she avoided doing her smear test, and by the time she eventually did it, they found cancerous cells, and she died, not long after. And had she gone for her regular smear test, she would have been able to have identified it earlier, maybe done something about it. I think here in the UK, your smear tests start from the age of 25, but you can actually request smear tests earlier than that. I bet you didn't know that. There's a lot of things that I didn't know that I was able to do that we can ask for, and they deliberately keep that out of our educational understanding, because it does boil down to money, let's be honest. But you pay your taxes, and if you don't, your parents did, and you live in the UK, and you should be able to access healthcare just like everybody else. So I wanted to leave you guys with that, and I just want to thank the ancestors almighty for being able to give me the peace of mind and to get negative, no abnormal cells, negative everywhere. I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy. So I wanted to share that with you guys. Also as well, you guys know that I continue to record footage for the vlog, and I keep saying it every week, and I'm going to continue to say it. I'm really loving it, because I just don't feel the same pressure. I'm not thinking, oh my God, I've got to upload this week, because I have more than enough retrospective episodes of the vlog that I'm recording, and it's just a matter now of editing. So you imagine I've got a lot of stuff to edit, but I record and I put things in folders per month. So you guys will be watching it a few months back, but I think you guys are really going to enjoy watching it that way. And in January, there's going to be like a progression of those vlogs, and you're going to watch the progression happen, and hopefully you appreciate the journey. And those of you who listen to the Toy Talks podcast, I think you're going to have a real big appreciation for the content of the vlog, because it will give the podcast a lot of perspective as well, that you guys will know I was going through XYZ, still uploading, still recording, and still editing the podcast, while still also doing my social media as well. So there is a lot on there, and I've called the podcast At Home with Toya because I'm in your homes a lot of the time. Well, I know I'm in your homes every Tuesday, or whenever the date is that you listen to the podcast. So I thought it was only fitting that I would call it At Home with Toya. And I'm moving to a different chapter of my life now, whereby, I'm definitely a lot more of a homebody than I was before. And also, what does home look like? It's your opportunity to have access into my life and see how I live. And sometimes my life is pretty boring. Other times, interesting, exciting. but we're going to go on that journey together. Obviously, this is Black History Month as well, so I am booked back to back to back organisations. I've even got a university that have booked me as well for a presentation and a talk. So I'm going to take you on those journeys as much as I can, or as much as these organisations allow me to vlog. But I don't think I've had anyone say no to that, so I think it should be fine. And then you guys are going to see like my little quirks, because I'm also a little bit of a geek. And you guys are going to get to see that, and see some of my friends as well, and the people that I spend time with, like my safe spaces. So I'm really looking forward to that. So if you haven't already, go on. I don't know if it's easy to find, because I've recently changed the name of the YouTube channel, which used to be Ms. Washington. So obviously rebranding and everything. But if you go on there and type "At Home with Toya," I should hope it will be on there. If not, you'll just have to wait until November, because that's when I'm launching the vlogs. It will be November, and close to the time I'll let you know the date. But also I'm waiting for my new iMac desktop so I can start editing and upload the vlogs, and they will be weekly vlogs. I'm planning to upload them on Sundays. So if you think about it, Sunday vlog, Tuesday podcast. So let me know if that works for you guys. I might actually put a poll up on Instagram as well. Let's read a dilemma. I've already addressed the dilemma, but I do also want to make clear, please, if you've got a dilemma, can you email hello@toyatalks.com? Do not DM me your dilemma, because I'm probably going to miss it. Yeah, and in the unlikely event that I don't miss it, I have to then remember to talk about it in an episode. And that's a lot. There's a lot going on. Like, I have an assistant for a reason, because she keeps me organised. So in order for your dilemma to not slip through the cracks, I need you to send it to a central place where then I won't miss it, if that makes sense. So let's read the dilemma. Hi Toya, I was wondering if you could give me some advice, please. Recently had 2 job offers within legal project management. One was fully remote for 6 months within the public sector. The other was 2 days in the office, but in central, what she means is central London, and a really well-known Magic Circle law firm. Both offered me roughly the same amount of money. I tried to negotiate and ask for more money at the law firm because of my second offer. They said no. Fine. I took the job. Oh, God. I messaged my soon-to-be manager asking if there was anything I should read up on in order to prep myself. He said no. Just rest. I'll have time to catch up once I start. I said no worries, thanks. I then received a message saying, did HR inform me that I'll be in 3 days a week in the office due to being a new joiner? As a new joiner, you need to do 6 months, 3 days in the office apparently. I feel a little deceived, as I had 3 interviews with different members of staff and an assessment prior, and I was told 2 days constantly. The additional day going into central London is money I did not budget for. Well, it's money you didn't budget for, darling, because you didn't negotiate anyway, so we're going to deal with that in a minute. I've already resigned from my present job and declined the other offer, so I feel stuck. Honestly, not looking forward to the job anymore. My current roles have been fully remote for the past year, so the 2 days was already a compromise for me. I haven't been vaccinated. So why is 2 days a compromise if you know you haven't been vaccinated, and then for the last year you've been fully remote? Let's talk about it. And HR have not sent me anything regarding this. I've read all the contracts. It doesn't state that. Just the manager that messaged me. So then I did start asking her questions, and this is what I was able to establish. That her manager, her soon-to-be manager, who told her now she has to do 3 days a week, they were corresponding in WhatsApp. You heard me. And she'd already resigned from her present job. But you know where she went wrong in the beginning? It was settling. And it's this thing that we have as black women anyway. I know that I suffered from it early in my career, where we just tend to settle. As far as I'm concerned, and as far as I have said on this podcast, as employees, you have so much more power than you realise. There are so many podcast episodes here, and this young lady shared with me that she listens to the podcast. I said, no, you don't. You hear the podcast, you're not listening. Because number one, if you listen to the podcast, you would know that there's a negotiation masterclass. Did you purchase that masterclass? Did you? Any organisation, and I'm going to say it again, any organisation that refuses to negotiate you have to understand then that that is the precursor to that employment. Rigid negotiation, rigid employment. Facts. Secondly, when you are looking for a job, you need to know what you want. So let me give you an example. When my contract ends in March, so December, I'm going to start reaching out to my contacts. And what I do is, listen, I handle this like a project. I send them an email blast and I'll say, hi, here's my updated CV. As you guys know, consultant, continuing consulting. This is what I require. And I have non-negotiables. One of my non-negotiables is I am fully remote. Fully. And this is not something that is talked about in an interview. It's in writing. So before I've even quit anything, I'm getting it in writing. And I think that the excitement of a new job often distracts you guys from what you're actually doing. And these organizations know you're easily distracted. It's excitement. But it's not over till it's over, as my dad used to say, God rest his soul. Until the ink is dry on the paper, you should still be looking for a job. Because these organizations are mad. Listen, when they're advertising their job, they do big inflated balloon shoulders to come and tell you 2 days. Of course they're going to tell you 2 days because they know that the market demands them to offer 2 days. The market demands them to offer 2 days. So that's what they're going to use to lure you in. But your contract didn't say it. Nothing said it. And then he just confirmed it in a WhatsApp. Why do you guys believe these managers and HR people? Why? Why do you think that you don't have to do things in writing? I asked her, how do you communicate with your friends? She said, WhatsApp. So is this your manager, your friend? No. So why are you communicating on WhatsApp? Everything has to be documented, my dear. The offer letter, listen, before you even get to contract, the offer letter should have the terms of what will be in that contract, i.e. your non-negotiable terms. If an offer letter doesn't have fully remote, if the offer doesn't have the negotiated salary, why are you even quitting your job? This young lady, I was even frustrated because I said to her, listen, if you hear the podcast, then you hear me tell you no dilemmas via DM. So I already knew that following instructions, we're having an issue here. So I wasn't surprised now to read this. I have to be honest, I wasn't. The disappointment I have is you proudly tell me that you listen to the podcast. You don't. You hear the podcast. You're not listening. You have to manage your career like a project because there is no fairness in the world of work. And this is why I tell you guys, stop this corporate rubbish. There's no such thing as the corporate world. It's just a label to segregate the type of workplaces so they can decide how much money they want to give you. It's the working world. There's no corporate in it. Because if the only thing that differentiates these corporate roles is maybe the suit you wear, maybe your suit is ironed rather than tumble dried. That's it. Some bullshit. I have worked for Goldman Sachs. In the definition of corporate, it doesn't get more corporate than that. But I'm telling you, having worked at Goldman Sachs, worked in the public sector, worked in the private sector, charity sector and third sector, it's all the bloody same. They're all full of shit. Do you understand me? I'm very disappointed. I'm disappointed that you didn't think more of your skills. You didn't think more of what you have. That these people called you for interview and refused to negotiate. Do you know how disrespectful it is? Let me tell you how I take it. If you refuse to negotiate, you're not putting respect to my skills. This young lady, you didn't listen to the negotiation masterclass. You didn't buy it. And if you did buy it and you listened to it, you didn't listen, you heard it. You didn't listen. Because I give you literally the toolkit of how I negotiate. This is how I negotiate all my contracts to date. It's in that masterclass. And to maybe early next year, all those people that bought that negotiation masterclass, there's a bit of a surprise for you. There's going to be follow-up. Yes, because the commercial space has changed slightly. So the skills and everything I teach there is still relevant. But I'm going to give you add-ons. Add-ons, that's what we're going to call it. Masterclass add-ons. I'm going to give you add-ons. Because since you have now decided to invest in your career, me too, I will continue to invest in you guys too. So those people who have already bought the masterclass, you don't have to pay for the add-on. You do not have to pay for the add-on. I'm going to do add-on. The red flag to me here is when a company doesn't want to negotiate more money. Listen, whatever they advertise, there is a buffer. If you don't know it now. There's a buffer. If an organization really wants you, I've seen it with my own naked eyes. If an organization really wants you, they will either negotiate or they will give you exactly what you want. I've seen it. It's happened with me, where I'm about to walk away from an offer and you're giving me extra 10,000. Whole 10,000, that's an even number, you know. Me too was even asking for 6. You said you'll give me 10. So, come on. Even as a contractor, I still negotiate my day rate. Whether I'm perm, whether I'm fixed term contract, whether I'm consulting, I will forever negotiate that thing. Because organizations will never pay you what you're worth. They will not, because you're priceless. So why did you price yourself out of this negotiation? You were offered 2 jobs. Let me tell you what I do. Maybe you guys don't know. Let me tell you. I've been in many situations where I've been offered more than 1 job. I play them off against each other. Yeah. I will be honest. I have been offered something else. But I love what you stand for. I love the cultural and ethical understanding of the way you operate. I love the attention that you pay your members of staff. This is the place I see myself growing. I'll give them all the compliments, while I'm also giving compliment to the other one as well. Yes, you have to operate with these workplaces like you're dating. Yes. Yeah, I can't fully commit to a fully committed relationship until I see which job is bringing what to the table. So the fact that you were comfortable enough to decline an offer, and no, I need to see the offer in a writing, and I'll play them off against each other. Listen, there's been jobs here. I go as far as even getting a start date for both because I'm still deciding which one. Yes, I've done it. And then when I've chosen the one I want, I might even start one job first. Then I might say, oh, I'm ill, and then start a new one. And then I say, oh, I like the new one, and I quit the other one. I don't owe any of these organizations nothing. I'm savage, you know. I am very savage. When it comes to my career, interviewing and negotiating, I'm savage. Because look at what has happened now. This young lady should be celebrating a new job. She should be celebrating it. She's dreading it because it's already started with deception. And I'm telling you that this employment, you're going to come back and tell me, this is the precursor for what you're going to see in this job. As in terms of, it tells me about the attitudes of the manager, the attitudes of HR. Is this the type of place you want to work at? But now you have to make good of a bad situation. I'm going to just encourage you to listen to my podcast episodes because you are where you are now. And I told this young lady, you have to take this as an L. This L is called a learning lesson. Please go back to the podcast and now start listening. We all learn in different ways. But there is a lot of women here that listen to the podcast that tell me that, Toya, anytime there's a podcast, I take a pen and paper. Because that's how you learn. There is nothing I'm teaching here that I have not walked through in my own career. So if I'm giving you the blueprint, if I'm telling you avoid this, do this better, how to do this, you can't still be finding yourself in these same situations. So young lady, let me tell you something. Let us celebrate the positives here. You have a new job. Some people don't have a job. You clearly have some skills needed in your sector and in your market. Yeah? You've got some clear skills. What I would suggest to you if it was me, I'd still be looking for a new job, you know. I don't know about you, I would. I'd still be looking for a new job. And let me tell you something. If I then start getting interviews and they ask me what have I been doing, I said I just took a break. I took a break from my career. I wanted to focus on a few hobbies. Yeah. I remember there was one job. I was, this is during my perm days. I was unemployed for 6 months because I was on benefits. So now asked me, oh, what have I been doing for 6 months? I said, oh, I've been doing yoga retreats. I've just been taking some time out for me because I feel like we spend so much time in work and education. I just wanted to center myself and find balance. Not knowing that the interviewer was a yoga instructor in the weekend. Can you imagine? Who got the job? Toya. Oh, you people, they love all that. They love it. Just give it to them. Tell them you were doing kumbaya for 6 months. They love all of that. I traveled, I went to Bali. These times I've never even gone to Asia before. You need to start opening your mouth. You need to start opening your mouth. And I'm not sitting here saying, oh, be naughty, be mischievous. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have to know the audience that you're talking to. You have to know the audience that you're talking to. Some of these audiences are not going to understand you being unemployed for 6 months. They're not going to get it. They're not. All you're going to say, you're unemployed, they'll say, oh, benefit. Then these preconceived stereotypes start to kick in. They now lose sight of the reason they invited you for interview, and they're now looking at you from the lens of claiming benefits. And there's some people that look down their nose at people claiming benefits because they think that their taxes, their own personal taxes, is paying for you to wear the shoe and top. So you have to be smart. And as black women, we understand that those stereotypes are rooted in racial prejudice. So you have to understand how to navigate these people. Do you understand? You have to treat your career like a project, because your job title here, you said that you're a legal project manager. So why are you not applying those fundamental skills of project management in your career? Even you should know it more. You're a project manager. So you did not apply those things to your pursuit of your next employment. And I'm going to say it again. Please know the difference between listening to the podcast and hearing the podcast. Listen, you're not always going to get everything right, my dear. And maybe God has done this to humble you in understanding what you deserve. But this is called learning lesson. We have to go through them. But the pain of this one is that you are now not looking forward to the new employment. And that bit is sad. But you see that feeling, this feeling that you feel, keep it bottled and remember it so that you never go back there again. Do you understand? You have to make good of this situation. So you have a decision to make. Either you say, okay, you know what? I take this as a learning lesson. Let me take what I can learn from here before my next job, or you can start looking for a job now. That's what I'm going to say. Personally, if you say, Toya, what would you do if you're in that situation? I'll look for a new job, because I can't start a job with deception. Secondly of all, this vaccination, unvaccinated, what is important to you is remote working. So why did you compromise on 2 days? Again, it boils down to not knowing what you want. You needed to go into these interviews with a plan. Listen, your plan doesn't start actually before you go to the interview. The plan starts when you decide that you're looking for a new job. So my plan for my career, for the next stage of my career, starts in December. Yeah, I've got non-negotiables. It has to be fully remote. I will open the scope that it can be an international company. I've got no problem. I will not be, and when I write fully remote, I will not be attending an office. I'm not even saying whether I'm vaccinated or not. I don't need to tell them. I am a remote worker. Let's normalize that. It's normal. For the last year, we were doing normal. So let's not act like remote working doesn't make sense anymore. It makes sense. And whether you are vaccinated or not, these people don't care. But you and I know it's important to you because you've mentioned it here. So start centering it in your choices. Thirdly, you need to understand how to do your due diligence of organizations. When they start showing you this mess, start walking, start looking for some. It's at the interview stage, how they handle the interview. Did they turn up late? When you're negotiating, do they negotiate? If they refuse to, that's a problem. Because that means they're unwilling to fight for what they really want. Do you want a company that doesn't have passion? I like companies that have passion. They're passionate about wanting me, they'll negotiate with me. Even if they don't give me the top end, they've still negotiated on at least my minimum. They've negotiated on my minimum, and I know what my walk away point is. So they haven't allowed me to walk away, they've negotiated on my minimum. Okay, these people are passionate about getting the right type of employee, the right type of work experience, the right type of background into this organization. Okay, I can work with that. These things need to be important to you. And as a project manager, I expect you to deal with your career as a project. You need a plan, you need a purpose, you need a plan, and you need to be able to execute it in that order. So again, I have given you guys a toolkit. The toolkit is the masterclasses, the CV masterclass, interview skills, negotiation skills, redundancy masterclass, and the mother and daughter masterclass. I've given you 5 masterclasses, and then I'm adding more. You can't be now coming to me to tell me this. Come on, darling. So as much as I have been very honest and I replied to your DMs, I do want you to take this as a learning lesson. This will never happen again to you ever again. But I don't like to think that you are going into this new employment upset or miserable, because of course you're going in new, you're still having to learn processes and people, and as a black woman we know the rules of engagement in organizations is different, so we already have to know how to package ourselves and know how to navigate, let alone having the added upset of being deceived or not feeling, or the feeling of unfairness from that perspective. So I've given you your 2 options. Hopefully you make the right decision. As you know, Toy Talks, we're all here to learn and grow. And there is somebody listening to this episode that is also going to learn. And you too have learned from this situation. I've learned from this as well. That despite a whole pandemic, there are still organizations that think 2 days a week is acceptable. It's not. It's not. I think the minimum of 1 day a week is even palatable. Not for me though. Just in general, for those of you who want to go in the office. So 2 more, I don't think they're dilemmas, they're more of comments or feedback. Hi Toya, thank you for your guidance on being a remote worker. I secured a new role as a remote worker. Had I not have listened to your teachings on the podcast, I would have still been going into the office. I was actually offered a job recently and declined because they lied and said it was working from home when actually it was every day in the office. Look at that. Look at that. Look. Do you see a common theme here? Do you see a common theme here? You see, and this is a guy that listens to the Toy Talks podcast, so big shout out to you. His working from home was his walk away point, and he walked away. And because he knew what he wanted and he knew his non-negotiables, he then found himself in another situation where they offered him a job fully remote. Look at that. Organizations are going to lie because they don't want you to work remote. They need to justify all the costs they're paying for buildings. Micromanagers need to have people to micromanage that they can see. Do you understand? Organizations are deceptive and they always have been. This pandemic has just highlighted and heightened things. Do you understand? Look at this. He was in exactly the same situation, but he had to walk away because he knew he couldn't compromise. It's not always an option to people, I know that. But for me, listen, my next contract, I will be clear about what my expectations are. You better believe the offer will have it in writing. I don't do WhatsApp messages. Who's having even my mobile? So that when I change my DP, the boss will come and ask me, oh, what did you get up to last night? I saw your DP change. Come on. When are we going to start setting boundaries? How many more episodes do we have to discuss these things before you start listening and start putting them into practice? That familiarity made that lady's new manager feel comfortable enough to put in a message. Oh, have HR not told you? It's now 3 days. Imagine just saying that like that, knowing full well she can't do nothing about it because she's already accepted the job. And our good brother here, see? Well done, my dear. Congratulations. And my last feedback of today, Toya, I wanted to thank you on this lovely Monday morning. I believe 4 months ago, I purchased your interview masterclass, and 3 months ago, I started my grad job. Adulthood is the ghetto, and I've really been adjusting these last few months, but it helps so much alongside your podcast. So thank you again. I absolutely love what you stand for and how you empower us Black women. I pray God continues to bless you abundantly in every aspect of your life. That message really, really brought a smile to my face, and I felt like, every so often you have to be reminded that, Toya, you're on this thing, changing lives and thing, because nothing makes my heart dance more than the success of Black women. And I'm one of those people that even my friends, I pour into them. Yeah, I am that person. If you want success, I want success for you. And knowing that there is this whole platform, and there is a lot of people I know that access the platform that will never write in, that will never send me a message, that will never say anything, but are just happy to be avid listeners. I see you, I receive you, and I thank you. And those of you who reach out to share your experiences, your dilemmas, or even just the success stories, I appreciate you too, because it's reassuring me that the Toy Talks podcast and platform is doing what needs to be done. It reassures me that as Black women, we are now continuing to elevate. And if the Toy Talks podcast and platform is part of that journey, it is a blessing. So thank you so much for allowing God to use you as a living angel to come and tell me this and give me this feedback. I want to thank everybody for sending me messages or your dilemmas. And even if your dilemmas have resulted in advice that you're not happy with, or think, oh damn, I have to take this learning lesson, just understand that the most operative word there is lesson, and the ability to learn from those lessons. So I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to say thank you so much. I want to also celebrate Libra season. It is my birthday on Wednesday, the 6th of October, and I am so grateful to be celebrating another year. I thank God Almighty and my ancestors for keeping me, for covering me, for clearing my tears, for being there for the good times and celebrating the good times. I want to thank every single person who has added to the Toy Talks platform and podcast, and I'm so grateful to be celebrating my birthday with you guys and be celebrating another year of life. I want to take this opportunity also to thank everybody who continues to engage, who purchases the masterclass, who listens to the podcast. Please pray for me. I'm planning to do a Toy Talks live next year. Those of you who attended 2018, you know what it was. It was a powerhouse of amazing black women congregated in one place, as I did it was almost like a podcast before there was podcast. So I want to do that again, because now we have podcast episodes in which to base the Toy Talks live on and give you guys practical skills, teach you how to review a contract, teach you in a live setting how to negotiate, all those good things. So keep praying for me. I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to see you guys next week, as we always do every week on the Toy Talks podcast. Make sure you have a great week. If you know there's somebody that would benefit from this episode, Mummy Issues, please, even if you have a great relationship with your mum and maybe you don't understand the difficult relationship that a friend or a relative has with their parent, they may find this episode useful, but also it may be useful to you in understanding the love and care that you need to afford that person as they navigate and try and make sense of their issues with their mother, or at least try to make it better for them. And that could be from walking away down to getting therapy or just needing a shoulder to cry on. So please take this episode, digest it, share it, and I'm going to see you guys next week. So if you want to follow me on social media, then if you don't know, my personal Instagram page is Toya_Washington. The Toya Talks podcast Instagram page is Toya_Talks. The Twitter handle is Toya_W with the hashtag Toya Talks or Toya Talks podcast. Follow me on Snapchat, Toya Washington, all one word. And if you want some light-hearted laughter or light-hearted relief, then follow me on TikTok. My handle is Toya Washington. If you have a work-related or life-related dilemma that you think that we could discuss here on the podcast, your anonymity will be protected. Please do email me on hello@toytalks.com. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toy Talks podcast.